I'll just get started then. Uh, yeah, for everyone asking, fall. What was the fall economic statement 2023? Not coming because budget 2024 came out. Budget 2024 also not coming. Why? It was boring and no one was gonna read that anyways. It didn't do anything, so it's like not even worth it. I read so much of it and it was like worthless. I think we talked about that actually on this. There was nothing there. I thought it was going to be a bold, cool, and unique thing that I could do, and it turns out it was just extremely boring, extremely tedious, and yeah, I would rather do almost anything else with my life, frankly, than read Budget 2024 more. But anyways, this is a makeup episode that I'm doing with Shrey. We had an episode where all of the files got corrupted, and I think that was the time where, like in our live recording, Bennett talked about the one. What was the guy stealing computers or something from the pharmaceutical thing?
London Drugs Guy?
Yeah, London Drugs guy. That hero was one of the stories, and Shrey and I both did a bunch of prep for each of our stories, and there was a lot of information. So it might not be the funniest episode in the world, but like I put too much work into that for it to go nowhere, and I know Shrey also put a ton of work in, so we're just going to kind of record it and get the info out for the people that want it, and that's what this episode is going to be. I'll also probably number it as, like, people have noticed that I've been skipping numbers, and that's been because of, like, failed recordings or episodes that could not materialize. I think I also counted the Snore of 1812 as episodes, but just didn't label them as such. So, the numbers are all weird, and it's about to get even weirder. We're about to go backwards. Sure, you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
I also wanted to give a little bit of precursor.
Oh, hell yeah.
The the deletion of the episode by Zencaster is truly a cultural hallmark, or what could have been a cultural hallmark.
Yep.
This is not going to be that. This is going to be a pure info dump, as brutally, as brutally pure and simple, that as much fluff as possible. And it's still going to be a great episode. It's going to be a fantastic episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like when you say a joke, and then your friend says the joke, and everyone laughs, and then you repeat the joke again.
Yep. That's going to be this episode. You're going to enjoy this, and you're going to yearn. You're going to feel like you're going to yearn for what could have been.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if this episode was funny, like still laugh sometimes, just for love of the game, just to support us,
I also wanted as a precursor to give that I recently went on a spiritual trip with Spenny here to a beautiful, beautiful place. I still tear up when I think about that place. I'm not sure about you, how you feel.
I'm crying right now. I'm crying as we speak. I went out for dinner today with a family friend's dad.
Okay.
We went out for dinner and it was great, and I told him all about our spiritual trip and all of the wonders that happened, which was very nice.
I can't speak about it too much without getting a little emotional. It's crazy how, after seeing heaven and you leave, it feels like you just had a really good dream, and then you wake up and you feel that sense of loss and yearning and that desire that you wish you were still there, and that's how I still feel.
Yeah, so you guys might have heard about a Cobalt episode that was coming. And I got some bad news for you. I couldn't finish the script in time. It's 90% done, but it was either delay the entire trip, which was like a trillion hours of driving, or just go there, have fun, and then come back and revisit it. But we went to Cobalt, we bumped into some truly incredible people, and doing so has given even more ideas for an episode and also a yearning to go back. I know for me, I had 2 brutal work days after, and it's like I woke up on the next morning, Monday morning, I had to go to work. I could hardly drag myself out of bed. I was feeling terrible. And I played Everything is Romantic by Charlie XCX because it was in my head, and it made it infinitely worse instantly. Just listening to Fall in Love again and again, Fall in Love again and again, Fall in Love again and again. And I was sitting there and I'm like, I went to Cobalt and I fell in love. And now it's just been ripped away from me. And I can't help but yeah, like you said, yearn. I can't help but yearn. I need to return.
The people, the landscapes, the environment, the history, the stories, just the stories everywhere. Just not that only you can see it, but you can feel it. I have this thing with history. I love history. And I have this thing where a part of it seems like it's a movie to me, a part of it just seems fake. That, these are all stories of people have nenever really existed. Apart from that, I read things, I'm like, I don't think that actually happened. There's no way that happened. This can't be real. And when I see any evidence of it being real, it's a huge shock to me. It's this amazing feeling like, no, this was the world. This is not just some dream someone made up. This is actually a thing. But seeing that in a full city was crazy. Just every corner, a thousand stories to be told and feel and taste and just be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm mostly off social media now, and one thing that I've really started to notice is just pictures of people are incredibly intimate now, to the point where it really is uncomfortable for me to look at pictures because I see the people in them, and instead of it just being another picture, it's now a picture of someone who has lived a life and had an experience and lived and died often, and I see them in historical moments that changed their lives, maybe a picture of a grandparent at a wedding, something like that. I saw one of those in the house and I was like, it's just so intense and strange for me. And going to a city like Cobalt, every single building is like that. Every single street is like that. You go around and there's murals and decorations and memoirs, pictures, quotes, just houses, buildings, mine shafts. There's everything. And the whole city, just the glorious metropolis of Cobalt, Ontario, it makes you really feel like you're a part of something and you're a part of that environment in a way that I just don't get here.
It's hard to explain. I know to people who are listening to this, there may be a feeling of we're mocking it, or there's this sense of what are they talking about? Is this a joke? Is this a bit? Is it funny? But no, it's hard to describe just how surreal but beautiful, how serene, I guess is the term for it.
Yeah.
When you're up there, and I recommend highly to anybody, read a little bit before you go, because I think once you read, you start to feel that connection and a deeper understanding of all what happened in such a small little place.
Yeah.
And the weight of all of it. Because when you start walking through, you start feeling and seeing, and when I mean feeling, I mean literally, in some cases, feeling the wind and feeling the voices. It's it's something which is hard to describe.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, when we went there, the day before, we were kind of half making fun of it. It is population of 900 something was the last statistic. And we thought I assumed I was going to show up and it was going to be a small dying town that just is a heap of scraps where something used to be. And that's what I assumed it was going to be. I drove 6.5 hours total to get there. I think it was insane. Yeah. And when I showed up, I guess we'll go more into this in the Cobalt episode, but yeah, I showed up, we had backup plans for other things to do nearby, and we were kind of ready to get a little joke out of it. And we did the entire car ride home. No music, no podcast, no anything. We just like chatted about the stuff we found. Not a single joke. It was just unreal. Just unreal.
I think you said it, you said it perfectly the day before. Like, worst case worst, we're gonna put a lot of effort for a mediocre joke, and years from now, people are gonna be like, "Oh, where did you travel to? We went to Cobalt, Northern Ontario. Haha, isn't that so funny?" But now I don't think I can. Like, no, I genuinely want to go back,
Yeah.
and not just once. I want to go back so many times. There's so many things we missed.
Yeah,
in
I
that
need
day.
to go back. We'll be going back soon, so the Cobalt episode will be happening soon. I will make sure of that. And now that I've been there, I realize that like the script that I had some detail, some information. It was good, but now that Cobalt is real, like now that I've been there, now that I've seen that it's like still there and the people who live there are proud of it, and like I would ask them questions and they'd tell me about this history. They knew it. I need to have a more respectful script as well. Not that it was like disrespectful at all, it wasn't, but it's, you can write about someone and then you meet that person, you're like, actually they're more than just words. And that was Cobalt for me, and I need to put some extra respect on its name and really make sure that any script that I do will hopefully carry an essence of Cobalt into your hearts the way that visiting Cobalt has impacted mine.
They really knew everything, didn't they? They were just random people just talking about the coolest of things, and so we drank South Darjeeling. We drank rare endangered tea in a mine shaft.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. Oh my god.
We met a Juno.
We gotta leave more details. Well, I have to keep it a little bit. I mean, it can no longer be nonchalant, but I can leave it a little mysterious for our actual Cobalt episode, as we can get into more details about the senses, the places we visited, and all of that. I think that's the best way to go about it. But yeah, Cobalt episode is coming. No clue about the Kissinger episode.
Rumor still has it it's coming.
Yeah, there's actually Blowback Podcast. They've announced a trailer for their Cambodia series, which is coming out that season, which is very Kissinger involved. So maybe we can do that and do a Kissinger episode after or something. Who knows? The world is our oyster. Yeah, I think that's it.
Season 5, Cambodia, Kissinger, Cameroon, buy for $25. Wow.
I got methods, all right? If it's on the internet, I'm good enough with the internet that I can get almost everything for free. But I'm not so good at the internet that like basic things work for me. Like I'll pay for a podcast and it won't record.
And for those who are listening, no, Spain does not pirate. He hacks, and he goes directly to the servers.
Yeah,
this is a threat. He's done it before. He'll do it again.
Yeah, I actually go to their houses, log on to the computer, and then just copy the files onto a thumb drive.
For moral reasons, he does not pirate.
Yeah, only if their door is unlocked.
Yes.
Of course. If their door was locked, it would mean they didn't want me there.
Exactly. That's why his door is always unlocked.
All right. Well, I guess let's okay, one sec. Wait, does Windows Tile Management not work on Windows 11? No fucking way.
Technology not working.
Both left and right screens are taking up 3/4 of the screen. Okay, heaven. Again, regular, like, technology that's supposed to work does not work. Technology that's extremely difficult, I can usually squeeze some juice out of. But, anyways, I guess, yeah, I'll get started with what was my information episode. And what I'd talked about in the corrupted episode was the 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. And I actually did like an information bomb on this. Usually I read up on it and then I go to the ideology store, get my opinions, and then just kind of start spitting based on my experience and all of that, what I know, the theory that I've read. This one, I kind of went ham. I was looking at like actual, like a bunch of not primary sources. That would be like investor documents, wouldn't it? Who knows?
Yeah.
Like I was getting a lot of real shit going. But so essentially, Canada is slapping 100% tariffs on Chinese vehicles, or Chinese electric vehicles, which is absolutely massive. Essentially, that means, let's say a Chinese electric vehicle was going to cost 20,000 Canadian dollars. Now it will cost 40,000 Canadian dollars for the consumer, and $20,000 will still go to the person who produced it, shipped it, whatever, and $20,000 will go to the government as a tax. So tariffs.
I want to just make a small fix to what you just said.
Oh, already?
You said it's coming. This episode has taken us so long. It's already here.
Oh, well, there we go. It's here. I'm glad I didn't already bomb information on tariffs, because like tariffs are something that I actually am kind of like really I think are really cool, and at least interesting in the dynamic that they create, and protectionism as a whole. I think I already have an episode where I say that protectionism as a policy is something that I find very interesting, because it has been a big strategy in the past. The fact that it was a big strategy has kind of been systematically erased, and then people are slowly coming around to like a protectionist reactionary movement. So it's coming around for the first time, but it's not the first time. But conditions are so different now that like it is kind of the first time based on how much things have changed. But so what's the narrative on these electric vehicles? You know, if I open up the news and such, what are they saying? What information are they getting across? This is where I'm going to start, and then I'm going to discuss my opinions on the narrative, and then a couple just specific points related to it. So the narrative is that China is subsidizing its production of electric vehicles in like a fully integrated fashion, every part of the supply chain, and that they're overproducing vehicles deliberately to flood the markets and drastically undercut Western car companies to make it so that, let's say, similar to Uber, they come out, they're so cheap, they put a bunch of investor money into it. Taxi cab companies can't afford to be that cheap because they have to pay their workers. Taxi cab companies go broke, and now you just have Uber. Essentially, it's that for electric vehicles. They're saying that they're trying to drastically undercut Western companies to make them go broke. So they say that car companies are producing at a huge loss, and they can only do it with subsidies from the government. And yeah, they do not just the end product like we do here, but the entire supply chain, which is a different strategy, which is kind of interesting. And they say that we need to protect our infant industries. So an infant industry is essentially just saying, like, let's say Canada is just trying to get into, car production or something like that. We have a few cars. You kind of price up the competitors so that even though Canada's production, it isn't the best cars, it makes it so that it's an option that some people might pick, which gives the companies more money, which helps the companies create better vehicles and then get actually competitive in the global market. It kind of forces forces more business their way so that Canada gets more industry. So that's what they're saying we need to do. And, okay, there's a couple weird things that I saw, but, okay, I'm coming back to that. They say that China is leapfrogging combustion engine production and going straight to electric, but, like, electric cars came first. And also, like, do we want China making 1 billion gas cars right now? I thought we didn't want that. Aren't we always complaining about China polluting? Alas. And they say that in the market, China is giving themselves an unfair advantage. There's a couple other things they use other than just subsidizing everything to create an unfair advantage. They say they're using like forced labor. They say they're skipping on environmental standards. And they're also saying that they're doing a deliberate state of overproduction to cripple Western industry. This is kind of what I gathered from reading and listening to the news at the time and just writing down the points that they were giving. I already attacked one of their points. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I got excited. I'm only human. So I'll give rebuttals to a lot of these points. The first one is that, like, this whole subsidizing industry and using state subsidies to create unfair advantages, China has a trade surplus, so they are sitting on a lot of money. They have a ton of money to invest. That's the beauty of having a trade surplus. So we gave them the trade surplus by outsourcing all of our production there, and now they're using it. Like, that is fair game. It's hard to really say it's an unfair advantage. And another thing that they don't really mention is China's use of much stronger vertical integration in their companies, which optimizes production better. You'll notice that they can actually build things like trains. Planes is a place where they're actually starting to blow up. Language. They're actually starting to do a lot of production right now. And yeah, even with cars, American cars, we can't seem to do reliably. Chinese vehicles are coming in more reliably. So, Canada, this is a protectionist measure, right? What are we protecting? We don't make cars here.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we do.
Well, like, it's foreign companies, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it's foreign companies, but we manufacture a lot here.
Yeah. So we have this weird dynamic going on where it's a mix of, like, I'll say, like, a weird half-baked protectionism, where what we're doing is we're protecting other companies, like foreign companies within our borders, which is just strange. You would figure if you're doing protectionism, you would want it to be, like, purely us, to give us a better advantage. And it half does that, but also profit is not strictly here. So it's like, I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. You're right in calling me out on that. But it is odd, to say the least.
Yeah. So Canada's always been pretty big into manufacturing automobiles specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And people may remember the great GMs and the Fords and the Hondas, which are all built in Ontario. And we have a ton of foreign companies doing a lot of car work here. The biggest manufacturing company, one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the world, is based out of Canada. And they do a lot of cars as well. But they don't do the cars, they do, like, the certain internal components. I'm talking about Magna, if you know Magna.
Mm-hmm.
Massive company. Beast of a company.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of...
Sure, your audio's a little, how do I say? It's not very clear. I'm not sure if you have a different mic or something.
Changing mics.
How's this?
Much clearer.
Okay. Canada has a huge auto manufacturing company, a group of companies. Like, for example, the ones who received support specifically for their EVs include Honda, Stellantis, Volkswagen, Ford, GM. These are all in Canada.
Yeah.
But they're obviously foreign companies, so obviously a portion of the cash goes outside the country. Mm-hmm. The belief in Canada is that, due to a variety of reasons, we don't own car companies anymore, which are Canadian. For the most part, there's a few left, but for the most part. But the people working in those car companies are Canadian, after all. So the Canadian government's position is we have to protect the Canadian workers, specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're protecting our section of the supply chain.
Yeah, there's a reason why Canada is called a branch plant economy. Or, where the branch plants and then the resource extraction happens here specifically, but the final dollars go up to the corporate execs in Japan and Korea and the US.
Everywhere that we've sold off to.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there are, like, a few big things that we do. And one of the things that I specifically pointed out was, like, we make batteries and all of that. And we're trying to expand a lot of our production in batteries. which is kind of interesting. One of those resources that has historically gone to batteries, cobalt. I wonder if we're going to hear about that at any point. But Tesla, where do they get their batteries? CATL is where they're trying to make a big deal, which is a Chinese company, which is lower cost for better batteries. So that's the big American companies are trying to do that. America sanctioned China, like other countries giving China a lot of resources. You'll see stuff like semiconductors, batteries, and stuff like that. And because they have this surplus, they just invested in those fields, and now they dominate those fields. So we kind of forced protectionism on them. And interestingly enough, in that case, it worked. But I don't know how it's going to be doing protectionism when you're a consumer economy. This is what I said, it's new. Like, that part is new. Usually protectionism is for countries that kind of get harvested, but because of that, they end up with like an investment surplus that they can do something with. So American vehicles are known to be pretty shite. Like, Canada has also come up with a bunch of goals where we wanted to have all electric vehicles by 2030, or like all sold vehicles be electric by 2030. That we mandated that, and people can't afford them. So manufacturers have now cut back on production of electric vehicles. I believe 40% of people, if I have my numbers correct, I don't have these numbers written down, but 40% or if not more, people who have bought an electric vehicle have said that their next vehicle is going to be a gas vehicle.
The entire country has done a really good job overall of EV chargers, but the issue still is from a lot of people is that they're still inconvenient at the end of the day. Like, you're staying at a charging station for like 30 minutes to an hour, just plugging away in your car. But from what I've seen is that in the Consumer Reports, more people are just scared of EVs in the north.
Yes.
There is a perception, and I mean, I believe it. I don't know how true it is at this point, but I believe it, that they're not very good in winter, not as good as they say they are in winter.
Yes. Electric batteries, when you put them in not even crazy cold temperatures, will lose up to 40% of their charge efficiency. So it cuts range in about half, let's say. Now, cold temperatures, as the battery warms up again, as temperature returns to normal, they will recover their full charge. But with really hot temperatures, they do not recover that charge all the way. So they take permanent heat damage. And in the cold, you just get half range, which is something that people don't want to deal with. If I'm planning on driving to Cobalt, Ontario, I don't want to be like a couple 100 kilometers in expecting I'm perfectly fine, and suddenly I'm almost done. Like, battery running out at an obscene rate. That is scary to me.
That's the exact reason why I've personally, as someone who wants to drive an electrical vehicle to Cobalt, Ontario, I've personally started leaving my gas engine running all day, all night outside to help warm the planet. So that eventually the temperature can stabilize at a higher level, so we can start driving Cobalt and EVs.
Yeah, exactly. If we raise the temperature, then EVs will be more efficient, so there'll be less climate change. I see.
Exactly.
It's all coming together. Other interesting things: lack of safety with electric vehicles. We've all talked about the Cybertruck build quality. Now, Tesla previously had a pretty good track record with safety, but there are a lot of electric systems, and there are frequently things like when a gas car, something goes wrong, it can go catastrophically wrong. But it's been very well developed for a very long time and is generally pretty safe. Electric vehicles, not everything, it's pretty good, but the hazards are not, how do I say, very substantial to think about. It's still kind of mysterious, it's still kind of new, and we are still getting just things that we don't expect happening. There's stuff like if a car lights on fire, the door's locking and you can't get out. That's not good. What happens if your car falls off a bridge or something and goes into the water and the battery's short? what happens then? There's these little mysterious what ifs that seem to pop up with electric vehicles a lot. Hey guys, post-production Spencer here. When I recorded this, I forgot to mention that electric fires are also very different to handle from gas fires, and that can make things way more complicated, including fumes and the like. And it is kind of sketchy. It is kind of sketchy. All right, let me get back to some of the points. The point of China forced labor is like, okay, that's not great. I believe it. I believe China's doing some forced labor, some very low-wage labor, sure. We got our cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So...
Well, okay, to be fair...
This isn't like... that's not saying that it's not bad, but all I'm going to say is like, blood, we're both in there.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like, there is no good answer right now. Like, we are doing that from what I understand, and it's not great. The Canadian government is desperately trying to open up the mines in Northern Ontario, specifically in the regions around Temiskaming Shores, Timmins, Cobalt, etc., and trying to open up new mines there to replace a lot of the blood minerals we're getting from other places.
Yeah.
The dream, of course, is that every single part of the electrical vehicle, from the rock and ore found all the way to the final car, is going to be done here in Ontario. So they are working.
That would be cool. But I'll come back to that point. Don't worry. Don't worry. I love crushing dreams, Trey. That's all I'm good for. So my last kind of rebuttal point that I had, well, I guess I go into some specific points, but my last general one is environmental standards, where everyone's like, oh, they're like skimping on environmental standards to make these vehicles. China's doing way more than we are for environmental standards. They've reached their environmental goals that we planned with the world, like UN and stuff, early. We are not making it, and we're about to go into a conservative government, and it's not gonna help things. So I think that's kind of a moot point. Like, they've reached their goals to some extent. I'm sure there's some wonkiness if we do all of our scans, but like, they got a big population, you know? Like, there's gonna be more raw output. So yeah, also, we want like smaller cars, we want cheaper cars, and we want electric cars to reach our environmental standards. We are blocking smaller, cheaper electric cars, which hurts our goal for environmental standards. Now, I don't think that like electric cars are the solution, but they're being pitched as the solution. And if they're being pitched as the solution, we can't shut them down like that, in my opinion. Also, blocking cheaper vehicles. This is bad for the affordability crisis that we're in. Like, we would want more affordable vehicles. We are getting more affordable vehicles, and they shut that down. As well as, if China's being more productive in building vehicles, then, and we're in a productivity crisis. Hey, post-production Spencer again, I accidentally misspoke this next part. But having these cheaper electric vehicles would make it easier for companies to invest in better infrastructure for their vehicle fleets, which would make our economy more productive, and we are shutting that down, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I have some answers that go outside of the realm of tariffs, so I'm just going to kind of leave that with some vague questions first, and we'll revisit in future episodes. But I also want to address one thing with tariffs, which is tariffs being like good versus bad for business and all. And it's kind of one of those things where it's all trade-offs. So let's say that we have a bunch of cheap Chinese electrical vehicles coming in, and we want to, bolster our own industries. What industries is this good for? Well, car manufacturers and stuff like that. Maybe car components. That is two places where maybe we are protecting Canadian jobs. But also, on the flip side of things, you now have a bunch of industries that have less access to cheaper, reliable electric vehicles. You now have less people that have access to these vehicles. And that comes in with other impacts on different industries. I know in the States, Uber was doing a very large deal with BYD, which is a Chinese battery company that's gone into electric vehicles, saying that they were going to try to switch everything over to BYD vehicles because they were reliable and they were cheaper with standard parts, so they thought they could save a bunch of money. I'm not going to stand for Uber, but stuff like this just means that is no longer going, like, it's going to hurt in those jobs. So that's a trade-off. So,
well, I mean, it's a trade-off, but like I mean, if you're an environmentalist, this is an awful policy. Period.
Mhm.
If you go with the assumption that electrical vehicles are the way of the future to save the environment, I do think it's overall better for the environment.
Mhm.
It's a trade-off. It's sorry, it's not a trade-off. It's a pure loss.
Mhm.
The cheapest car, if you go from an affordability crisis, this is stupid as hell, right?
Yeah.
Like the cheapest car, the cheapest new car you can get in Canada, according to Auto Trader, which I think is a pretty good website,
Mhm.
the cheapest car you can get right now in Canada is a Mitsubishi Mirage for 17,000 and a Nissan Versa for 20,000. These are two cheapest cars. The cheapest electrical vehicle is the BYD Seagull, which is 13,000.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like
it's
almost
not
half
even
of the second cheapest.
close.
No, it's almost half the second cheapest. That's
Yeah.
insane.
If you're looking for a car and you just commute to work and back, right? What would you buy? Would you get like an absolute dumpstered secondhand, like something that you can afford? Or would you sit there and go, oh, there's a brand new electric vehicle that is pretty reliable? From my understanding, I guess more testing will be arriving as the vehicle's released, but they've, I believe, got a pretty good track record. Like, yeah, that's what everyone would buy. It just makes
Right.
sense.
From a economic standpoint and a long-term thinking, we have to have these tariffs. We have the ability to make these cars here, and we have a history of making cars, so we should be making the cars.
But also, if we want people like, let's say, car companies to be more productive, this is an out for them to give them the tariffs, because a $13,000 car will now cost $26,000, which means that the companies just do not need to try to compete as hard to do that. They don't need to invest in their manufacturing, production, and all of that. They'll have a much larger wiggle room. Like, for a lot of our cars, I guess I kind of split between this. Is one, Canada is trying to develop at least a car-adjacent economy.
So we have GM is here. We have all these car companies. So we do have a car industry. But you're right. They're not. Most of them are not Canadian.
Yeah, I get adjacent isn't the right word. I was trying to go for more like we do parts manufacturing and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I'm cheesed that we don't have Canadian cars.
Yeah, we have very, very few, and they're more like specialty cars.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of truck companies if you're into big trucks like the 18-wheelers, but cars not really.
I'll come back to this where it's just like, well, no, I'll go there now. How bad are we trying to get into car production in the grand scheme of things?
Big.
Because we're really trying to, but everything indicating city planning and stuff like that, the whole wave right now seems to be, we want less cars.
What are you talking about?
We've gone all in on cars, and people are now like, they're trying to go into, okay, we want more rail, we want more bike lane, stuff like that. That's at least the trendy thing for city planning. Now, I know that Dougie's not really doing that, but that's where more and more projects seem to be headed around the world, and it is working. It has historically worked as people have moved away from car-dependent infrastructure. I would have figured if we were trying to go massive on an investment, we might try to copy some of that strategy, which has been working out, as opposed to doing our 401 strategy of do everything for the cars, or the Houston strategy, or like so many giant American car-based cities, which we realize, yeah, we have like 1 trillion cars, but it kind of sucks.
I don't think we're going at all into no car. Like I still think cars are not just here to stay, but still growing. Like the population, as the population grows, there will be more cars.
I
Now
think,
the percentage might go down.
yeah,
but-
that's what I'm thinking. Is like, when I think of what industry do we really think is coming up in the future that we want to be a leader in? I don't know if Canada is going to be able to be that competitive in cars. I simply think that, like, China's too big. I think we're behind the curve by a ton already. Cars are already, like, it's kind of like smartphones where we're not that far off of the form of a car. We have really good, really reliable, safe cars with long range and stuff like that. I don't think, like, I guess personally this is a very opinionated thing. I think there's a handful of reasons to say, like, in 25 years, is Canada going to be, one, a big innovator in the car space? Is there going to be a ton of innovation in the car space? And also in, like, yeah, in 25 years, is that where we want to be as, like, a resource-based, not that large country? We're, like, not small. Don't get me wrong. But if we're on the 25-year scale, there's a lot of big countries that are coming up.
I feel like that's giving up, though.
I don't think it's giving up as opposed to saying maybe we should focus elsewhere as opposed to here. I'm not saying let's give up on everything. There are a lot of small countries that are really great at a lot of very specific things. I just feel like for cars, it's like maybe like 50 years ago, cars would have been a pretty hype idea. 30 years ago, cars would have been a pretty cool idea for going into. I feel like it's behind the curve. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in 25 years, cars are completely different and everything has radically changed. But yeah, I feel like it's chasing a train that's like, it's, you know, it's on its way out.
Well, I just sent you a link.
Look, I've been wrong before. This
I
is
sent
just
you a
my
link.
line.
Click the link.
Click the link.
Where you'll see a very pretty thing that I'm very excited for. I've been following this for years now.
Oh baby, the Avro Arrow is back.
Oh, she's so pretty. She's so pretty. I love. For those who cannot see, because this is of course an audio medium, so none of you can see. I hope this is this is Project Arrow, which is this ambitious goal of making a fully electric Canadian vehicle, where every manufacturer is Canadian, and every partner involved is Canadian, and it's costed so far 20 million to do it, and there's been 25 innovations as part of this project, and I believe that means patents. And like it's still ongoing. They've got a huge number of companies based here in Canada working on this. It's really exciting, to be honest, and it's a very beautiful car, if I say so myself.
Looks good.
And so this is just
Looks
one
good.
example.
Oh yeah, sorry. I skipped some points. You keep going.
And so this is just one example. The Canadian car industry is massive, and there needs to be more done to protect it. Like I as much as it sucks that it's not owned in Canada, it is important to note that they are Canadians working here. And let me see if I can find out how many Canadians are working here.
While you're searching, I just want to kind of bring a callback as I say this to my overall vibe of like electric cars having some inherent flaws. Like, I guess if we can get over electricity versus temperature, that would be dope. That would be an awesome innovation. And if we could get in on that, like, that's unreal. I'm not sure how close we are to that. I'm unconvinced. But science does that. If we can make all this stuff work, it could be really cool. I don't know how much Canada's going to be the one to do it. I think there are other avenues to go for. I don't think electric cars are the future, personally. I think they still have massive emissions. It's just reduced. I think that tire wear and like road wear becomes a bigger problem with electric vehicles because they're heavier to an extent. It's not like a nuclear bomb hitting the roads, but roads will wear out faster. Rubber will come off of tires faster. And like the rubber from tires is a huge thing of microplastics and like environmental certain damages to that, and animals and all. I'm unconvinced of electric cars, which leads to probably some of our fundamental difference. Like I have a heavy anti-electric car bias for a variety of reasons. So that's why like this really like cheeses me more. I think tariffs are interesting. I don't get this one. It seems to run counter to a lot of our goals, and I'm not convinced of the end game.
So here, let me just give you a little bit more to try to convince you.
Good.
Take a guess just how many people work in the auto industry. Indirectly and directly.
Oh, including indirectly.
Yeah, but obviously it can't be like, food.
Yeah.
The restaurant, which helps give food to the workers, but people working in not just the cars, but the batteries, the components, the seats.
We got what, 40 million people?
Yeah.
I feel like I could go big. I want to go like
It's not
two and a
it's
half.
smaller than you. Okay, it's way smaller than that.
Okay.
There's no industry which is gonna be that much of our company.
Oh wait, no. We're all urban. I was thinking
Yeah.
like mining stuff and like mineral resource
Okay.
wealth and all of that.
Well, in that case, it's 500,000. 500,000 people.
500,000. Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
It's the second biggest export in Canada.
Yeah.
So
I might
like,
actually delete my number. Jesus Christ. 40 million to 2.5. What percent of the population is that?
that is around 5% of the country. Just well, to be fair, we know
5%
people
for
in the
like
auto.
a second biggest export. Actually, that like directly and indirectly, I'll accept it.
There's we know people in the auto industry. Some of our best friends work in the auto
Oh, yeah.
industry. It's a huge industry, and it's our second biggest export. That's massive.
Mhm.
And so there is like this desperate need for the Canadian government to protect it, because I'm not sure relatively how much ahead we are of other countries. I can't comment on that.
Mhm.
But relatively in our own economy, it's a huge part of the economy. And
Yeah.
so losing that is going to be like a massive blow to our own trade plus our own people.
Yeah. And as I talk about the tariffs and stuff, I guess there's the trade of yes, we would lose a lot of our auto industry. In doing so, we lose out on the cheapest consumer electric vehicles by a mile. What could that do for the economy? Everyone's already driving cars, maybe less than I imagine. But if it manages to be an absolute boon, turn us like to a more powerful grid, power investment, stuff like that, maybe it could have a chain reaction. We don't build infrastructure though, so probably not.
Yeah, well.
But let me get back to my last point, second last point, overproduction. This overproduction thing, they're saying that like they're selling cars at a loss in order to flood the market, undercut everyone. One, I was gonna say like for overproduction in general, I was gonna say who cares? You like markets, right? Like if we're all in on markets, we ball here, like congrats, you got to make something cheaper now. This is competition. I thought you guys liked that. But I'm not going to defend myself on that point. I like saying who cares to people that say stuff like this. If we give them a surplus, congrats. They're going to be far more competitive if they decide to use that surplus towards certain industries. We import what they export, and they have a much bigger population. They produce what we consume is nothing compared to their consumption, like the potential for it. Also, the prices on things like cars in China, including the cars that would be coming here, have been consistently rising. So that if they were dropping the price of cars and taking massive losses, that would not be the case, generally. Like, there's some subsidy stuff going on, but they're if there was overproduction, prices would drop at some point. That generally, unless there's always been overproduction, but that's just not it. China also only exports a small share of its cars. Their population is way bigger than ours. So that kind of cuts down the whole, just government investment we are not a dominant part of their market. They're not really aiming to undercut us. We're just catching residuals.
But that's with every industry, right? There's very few industries we can actually beat China on a numbers basis. Also,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't like
they're
the,
also
the
like a
argument.
third of the percentage of like what we import from places like China and Germany. So it's not like a big or anything. Like or no, the amount that they export, sorry, is one third of what like Japan exports and a third of what Germany exports. It's not huge percentage wise or anything like that. Then again, China's a massive country, but clearly it's not like their focus. The focus is not on just flooding everything with exports. So this is my problem with the narrative of overproduction and like China's economy being so weird and dominant. Is like, where? The numbers, like all the evidence that I can find outside it just being said, just does not point in the right direction, at least for the excuses that are being said. I would not
Yeah,
be shocked if there was suspicious stuff happening related to China and like tensions with Canada, especially. China doesn't love us right now. But like I like, show me where. Come
it
on,
is
Freeland.
interesting, right? Because like the Canadian government just can't go out and be like, look, listen, man, we're adding tariffs because we want to protect our own jobs. Because
Mhm,
this government in particular, but the general neoliberal consensus of the last like 10, 20 years has been we need to have that free market aspect,
mhm,
right? We need to have that free trade, the liberalization. The Trudeau government, one of the things they got elected on was the fact that they're looking at the CPP, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership,
mhm,
and other open ones. So they can't really do that about face like, no, actually tariffs make sense
mhm.
because we have to protect our industry because we know that opening up the markets could lead to other countries undercutting us in different ways. And so they're using all these excuses of, oh, it's an unfair market they're providing. I mean, sure, it's unfair, but those what we spend around $50 billion on our own factories here. Isn't
Yeah.
that unfair?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know how I didn't bring up this point because, sorry to interrupt, I'll give it back in a second.
yeah.
But like I always talk about this thing where it's like, yeah, like they have an unfair advantage. What do you want to call like the whole colonial era? Was that an
Well, okay.
unfair advantage? What do we want to call like this whole thing of like WEF forcing people into like no tariffs and stuff like that? Like we forced a narrative, and then when it became bad for us, they're breaking the narrative. Anyway, back to you, Shrey.
Well, I didn't even mean it on that. I meant
Mhm,
directly. Like here, one sec. Here, this is from the parliamentary budget of Canada. Around $52 billion is the total government support into our EV market here in Canada.
mhm,
52 billion is a lot of money.
mhm.
Is $52 of government support not unfair?
Yeah,
It's
what
not exactly
percent
a
would
free
make it
market.
unfair?
It's not really a free market, is it then?
Yeah.
And I'm personally pro the tariffs. I think that protecting our industry is super important. I just wish we didn't have to make this song and dance of, oh, they're the bad guys. That's why we have to do this. I wish we could stand on our own two feet and say, no, we're protecting ourselves. And that's the reason we're doing this.
Yeah, I think in an overall standpoint for support of the tariffs and stuff. So the BYD cars, I don't know if that was 13,000 Canadian or
That
American.
was
Um,
the Canadian.
Canadian. So that would go up to 26,000 Canadian, which is still extremely competitive. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's a part of it is they're expecting people to still buy the BYD electric vehicles, but in doing so, way more money would go through taxes to the government, which they could invest in our Canadian vehicles or something like that.
Good
Um,
point.
I guess the percentage seems extremely high. It's 100%. It doubles the price of vehicles. That is a lot, but they're still cheap vehicles. You know, it's tough to say as someone who loves taxes and loves paying taxes. Maybe that I jumped the gun. I don't know. That was kind of my conclusion. Was just like why are we inflaming tensions? I don't know if there's a way to better work this out. I feel like it should be lower. It seems a little extreme, which at least prompts a reactionary thing. But I don't know. Maybe if you did like a 10% tariff, it would still provide like a trade war type scenario. But there's my thoughts on the tariffs. We've well past midnight at this point for everyone. So if I am a little more aloof than usual, it's because
Yep.
Shrey, did you want to talk about BC United, our favorite soccer team?
I'll do a quick thing about our favorite soccer team. I mean, God, just thinking about the sports analogy, it's crazy how they were the dominant team,
Hmm.
the one that won the world champions multiple times, and now they folded. It's it's just such a fascinating story. So for those who don't know BC politics, I've been like saying for years that I'm a huge fan of Canadian politics in general. I'm a huge fan of Westminster-based politics. I think Westminster-based politics is just so fascinating. And I think that I think what's really interesting around Westminster politics is this idea that there's this grandioseness of of large egos and personalities always there, while at the same time, like in American elections, there's a huge egos that are always present with the presidential people and the governors and whatnot. You get that in Westminster politics, but also the chaos and the unpolishedness, if that's a word, of local politics. And so you get this really cool combination
Yeah, you get
of
the
the two
raw
to make.
cut.
Yes, exactly. And it ends up meaning that every single story becomes very Shakespearean, and BC is no different. In this country, specifically in Canada, we because of how diverse we are as a country geographically, we get some really weird political situations. Like if you're interested in, in politics of identity and philosophy of who we are as individuals and as a people, you check out Quebec's Westminster politics. Fantastic. If you want to look at backroom secret backstabbings, you look at Alberta. Fantastic amount of backstabbings constantly happening. If you want like multi-party maneuvering, New Brunswick is some of the best multi-party maneuvering I've ever seen of any place in the world. All these parties just constantly stealing each other's ideas and taking over each other. But if you want backstabbing, identity of philosophy, and multi-party maneuvering, you go to BC. They're they're incredible.
They're
So
the blockbusters.
they've got everything, man. And BC's history is also really weird. Like the founder of BC was a black guy back in like the 1860s, and he only got the job because I mean, he was an interesting character on his own. His grandmother was a black woman who owned a ton of slaves in the Caribbean. He was like educated in Scotland. It's a whole thing. And he was really famous for bringing in a bunch of black colonists to Canada because he said we need people who are loyal to to the crown. We need pure monarchists, and we need people who hate Americans.
Hmm.
And so the best person for that were black folks from the U.S. who were recently slaves. So he brought in a bunch of them to become the first black colonists in Canada, which is super cool on its own. And he only got the job as founder of BC because of the fact that all the white guys didn't want the job and he wasn't in the room, so they just gave it to him instead. Which is like crazy, right? But
Yeah.
but there you go. Or even if we go like beyond that, like here, I think one of the cooler people was that the second one of the second premier of BC was a guy named William who changed his name to Amor de Cosmos, which roughly
Holy
translates to lover of
Lord.
the universe.
Holy. They
He
had
just
people
loved the
like that
world.
back then?
He just loved the world so much. He's like, you know what? I want to be called known as lover of the cosmos,
That. You gotta respect them, you know?
right? And he was the one who is the main reason why BC is part of Canada. But as Corix, he was like deadly afraid of electricity, and he used to cry constantly in Parliament. And was just a very emotional man. It's like fantastic.
The constant crying in Parliament must have been so annoying.
Well, he was a premier too. Like
Yeah.
he was the guy.
You can't do that shit anymore.
No, I mean, can you imagine talking to Mr. Universe who starts crying because of how happy he is with the place?
Imagine that being like a major in a political party. One of the
Just a
things that
guy
I
who loves.
love about like old politics is it is very much this like series of myths, and it probably was
Yeah,
also like back then too. You can just turn on like YouTube and look up what someone was saying and make
yeah,
sure like and like correct any like little speech errors that they have, little gaffes and things. It would come through like a letter. and they could like touch it up, you know. So it creates very much a sequence of myths of different people.
No, exactly. Like, I mean, there's just so many stories and myths like that. Like, I was looking up some famous folks in Alberta politics, and one of the top politicians in Alberta was a guy named Harry Hayes. This is an aside, but Harry Hayes famously had this rivalry with this conservative guy. He was a liberal, and he hated this one conservative. And it got so bad that Harry Hayes once claimed he was the best milker in the world, and he could milk a cow faster than anybody else. And the conservative guy then challenged him to a milking competition. Like, it's just stories of myths and legends. Each one of these people.
Where was this?
This is Alberta. Harry Hayes,
Yeah.
by the way, later on invented his own cow breed, which is still one of the top cow breeds.
Straightest Albertan competition, all right?
Just incredible stuff. So, but just for the sake of time and for this story, it's a tale of two parties: the BC Conservatives and the BC Liberals. They were both started in the 1900s, in 1903 specifically, and they were very similar. The Conservatives were obviously a little more monarchist, a little more tariffy, didn't like free trade as much, and they dominated BC politics for first 13 years, and then the Liberals took over, and they ruled until 1928. The BC Conservatives won once more, and that was in 1928. The BC Conservatives have never formed government since then. So this has been a long time of the BC Conservatives more or less being dead as a party. In 1941, underneath the premiership of Duff Patillo, who was a liberal. Now, Mr. Duff hated the Conservatives with a deep passion, but the Socialists were on the rise, and the CCF, the precursor to the NDP, kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
Mhm.
It was getting to the point where the CCF were in second place, and this was a big fear for the Liberals that they will take over. So the party members threatened Duff and said, okay, we need to join the Conservatives, we need to merge with the Conservatives and make sure the NDP don't win.
Do not tell Lenin.
Duff got really upset with this, and he refused to agree with them because he hated Conservatives so much. So the party staged a coup and kicked him out. And then the Liberal Party went into a grand coalition with the Conservatives.
Damn, no one could have ever seen that coming.
Nope. Well, this led to a huge problem, right? Because the Liberals and Conservatives are now working together, and the CCF were kind of stuck. And this led to a tradition where in BC, what happens very often is the NDP will win, or will get very close to winning, and all the other parties will join together, form one party to fight the NDP. And that's been the tradition for decades now. So the first time was then in the 1940s. In the 1950s, the liberals changed the voting style and made a ranked ballot, where the idea was that you can rank who you want to vote. And the thought process was who vote Liberal will rank Conservative second. People who vote Conservative will rank Liberals second. Mm-hmm. What ended up happening was that the far-right ultra-conservative party ended up winning all the votes because they were the second choice for everybody.
Yeah.
And so that was the Social Credit Party. The Social Credit Party took over. They were the dominant super conservative group. Now, funny enough, they had this kind of weird, like, they nationalized insurance, they nationalized ferries, they nationalized electricity. They nationalized a ton of things because they hated socialists so much that they wanted to stop them at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a kind of funny historical thing where, like, all across the place as well, now everyone has, sorry, I've just been reading a book about this, is like, everyone goes on, like, home ownership being the biggest staple of how things are. But there was a point in the West, coming out of, like, the war and stuff, where both the conservatives and the liberals were just like, yeah, we should just abolish, like, landlords altogether. Just get rid of them as a class.
Yeah.
100%. And, like, everyone was just on board with that. Like, the left, the right, the center, everyone had their own flavor of let's just get rid of all of this completely. So in times like this, yeah, you hear, like, the very far right, and yeah, it is, but also, like, on specific policies, there's always these bangers that you can pull out of different time, like, where just everyone is so unified on one specific thing.
It's a consensus. It just becomes a consensus, which is crazy. But
yeah, it to think anything else is just unreasonable.
Yeah,
no matter
which is
what.
like right now, it's the neoliberal consensus. You also have to fund the corporation to do your work.
Yeah.
So we're on the opposite side of that. But the important point I want to highlight here is that when the Social Credit Party won, the NDP didn't win, and the Liberals and Conservatives started to collapse at this point. And the cycle continued where it was the NDP, who was always in a close second, or sometimes first, but usually a close second, and all the other parties combining to becoming the anti-NDP vote.
Mhm.
And so this time it was a social credit, and the social credit was in power until 1991, more or less, where they lost a couple of times to the NDP. The NDP would get around 40% of the vote, but the social credit and the non-NDP would always win by a slight amount.
Yeah, they would all fall in line. Any
Exactly.
moderate party, when threatened with someone who might actually be a leftist, will always align with the far right. I
And
mean,
it
we
got
saw this
so
again
bad.
in France recently with
Yep.
Macron. Generally, in France, what you do is they hold an election. Whatever party has the dominant share gets their its president in France, right?
Well, the prime minister in this
Oh,
case.
it is
Macron's the
it is
president.
prime minister.
Macron's the president. They have like a president prime minister system.
Okay, yeah, yeah. The whichever fucking leader, I don't know, man. They get
Yeah.
picked out as the dominant party. Power gets handed over to them, and such is life. So they leftist party had formed a coalition. They didn't like win majority, but they did win. And instead, I think Macron decided to pick the next person of from the party that was in fourth place,
Yeah.
actually, and had like a couple seats. He just picked them instead and was like, actually, instead of the progressives and the leftists, we're just going to give it to the right instead. We're going to meet in the middle and just go to the right. So it's a kind of tale as old as time.
And I mean, it got so bad for the conservatives that they last elected someone in 1978. That's the last person they've ever elected. And that was around 50 years ago. And the liberals were so weak, they only had like three or four MLAs by this point,
Mhm.
all the way until 1991. Now, in 1991, they had a college instructor slash pig farmer leading the party. And this pig farmer slash college instructor, he was able to at the time the liberals had 0%, 0 seats and 7% of the votes, but he was very, very charismatic, and the social credit party was going through a huge scandal. They were caught taking bribes from Chinese businesswomen, and this led to a huge collapse of the social credit party where they felt really bad about it. Plus they tried to ban the gay games, which is like this Olympics for gay people, and they were trying to make a quarantine for all HIV
Yeah,
victims. They're also putting a quarantine around them. So this led them to losing a lot of support. All of these things happening at once.
yeah. Just shotgun method for.
So when this happened, the Social Credit Party started collapsing, and the Liberals started getting more and more popular. But the Liberals were hitting a bit of a ceiling until it happened. And what happened was the NDP won because of the split vote, and the Liberal leader, he started sleeping with one of his MLAs. Both him and the MLA were both married to other two different people. As soon as they were found sleeping with each other, they married, and the party kicked them out for potential conflict of interest,
Mhm.
which is like complete lucky that this happened. And the mayor
Holy
of
fucking
Vancouver at the
drama,
time,
man. That's
yeah,
like
oh yeah,
actual TV shit.
yeah, and the mayor, like the pig farmer, who is extremely charismatic, leads his party to getting really, really high up from being dead in the water, then gets caught sleeping with one of his employees, you could call it, I
Yeah.
guess. They get kicked out of the party. The the mayor of Vancouver, Gordon Campbell, decides to run for leadership, and he wins. And because he's mayor, he's already strong connections with the biggest city in British Columbia. They win in 2001. So in 1997, the NDP were in power. In 2001, out of the 79 seats, 77 of them went liberal. This was the first time the liberals have won since 1940s.
Mhm.
It's a huge realignment. The liberals are now the strongest party in the entire Western Canada. They're the strongest liberal party in basically all of Canada.
Mhm.
and they controlled BC from 2001 to 2017. In 2017, the Liberal Party won 43 seats, the NDP won 41 seats, the Greens won 3 seats.
Mhm.
And so the Liberals were still the most popular, but during this era, because of how close it was, the Greens and NDP made a coalition and removed the Liberals from power. So this
Everywhere I
2017,
read, they say that this has led to apocalyptic-like collapse of society structurally. And when I say
coalitions.
everywhere I read, I mean the YouTube comment section.
Yeah. Well, the coalition. Well, funny enough, there's actually been some updates to that coalition, even now, years later. The Green Party leader was a guy named Andrew Weaver. He'll come up later. In 2017, the Liberals won the most votes. They lost. They got 43 seats, but they lost because the Greens and NDP were able to work together. In 2020 was the next election. The Liberals got 30% of the vote, but they were still the second place party. They were still dominant. Even though they weren't the NDP, they were the top non-NDP party. And so, given history, they're going to become in power soon enough. In February of 2022, the former finance minister for the BC Liberals, Kevin Falcon, took over as leader. During his leadership campaign, he promised to change the name of the party because, in his opinion, the Liberals were unpopular, not because of their own policies, but because they were tied to Justin Trudeau's Liberals. In August, one of his MLAs, John Rustad, released the following tweet, and this tweet is and he was a former minister. The tweet states that no net warming in Australia over the last 10 years, and the Great Barrier Reef has more coral cover this year than ever recorded. The case for CO2 being a central knob of global temperature gets weaker every day. Hashtag celebrate carbon dioxide. Now, this led to a massive firestorm on social media and led to a lot of questions to Kevin. And in anger, Kevin Falcon threatened John and told him to leave the party if he doesn't delete the tweet. Kevin then tweeted out saying, "Let me be clear. Climate change is one of the most critical threats facing our future, and the BC Liberals are strongly committed to substantive climate action and restoring BC's place as a climate leader in climate policy, world leader in climate policy. John Rustad does not speak on behalf of caucus on this issue." John, feeling upset about this, he refused to delete his tweet, and on John's birthday, he was removed from the party. A few months later, John decided to move and join the BC Conservatives. This was a dead party that had 0 seats for almost 50 years, but he just joined the BC Conservatives. The party had 0 MLAs, and since they hadn't had any support, they gave him leadership because they're like, who else would we give this to? You're the only person who's elected. And while he was getting leadership, the BC Liberals finally changed their name to BC United. Now, here you go. This is where it gets really crazy. So, months after this entire thing was happening, the BC United, or formerly known as the BC Liberal, was still polling around 30%, but it started to decline and decline and decline. And it got to the point where by August 27th, the BC United had around 8% of the vote in the polls, and the BC Conservatives had around 39%.
Yeah, so is
The
this
BC
like,
NDP were 40.
is this like right at like, because this is a steep decline and it's all picked up from conservatives, but my take, like, for everyone that can't see this, the NDP are in first. They have like a slight dip within a little bit of recovery. BC United is just like they're going up slowly and then hit steep decline. Green is very slow but like not too notable decline. And right as BCU was declining, the Conservatives take it all up. But if it's like a fight over the climate stuff, I figure the Conservatives wouldn't pick it all up based on the conservative history of everything. Like, is this a broader collapse of their party as well, or?
What do you mean? Like, for BC United?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, they were collapsing. They are collapsing through it.
Mhm.
It's they've been hit really, really hard. It's a multitude of factors, you could say. A lot of people didn't trust the BC Liberals anyways from what happened. There's one theory is that people also got confused because they're used to seeing the BC Liberals, but when the BC Liberals don't exist and they don't know who BC United is, they just don't support them in the
Yeah,
polls.
it seems like a small party kind of thing, like a
Yeah.
new. Yeah.
It could also be that some theories that they didn't like this change in name. It feels like they're trying to hoodwink them because nothing changed about the party. It's the same people.
Yeah.
They just changed the lipstick on the pig, so they felt kind of upset about this.
Mhm.
Another common theory is that Pierre Poilievre started rising the polls around the same time. And so the thought process might be that the BC Conservatives were just basing off of that, and that they were dominated, and that they got kind of buoyed by the same market forces.
Yeah, like the conservatives picked up, like, I mean, kind of like he was saying with distancing himself from Trudeau. The conservatives started smoking Trudeau. Poilievre seemed really cool, so he just picked up all the steam. That party.
Yep,
That makes a
yep,
lot of sense.
exactly. There was some other things where they started going really hard in some things, like COVID, relitigating COVID, climate change isn't that real, the sexual and gender identity policies. The concerns started really rallying against that, and that led to a lot of people's, diehard supporting it.
Yeah.
And so they got a good base, while the BC United were kind of like wishy-washy on that.
Yeah, the BC United, I'm not sure if their website is still up, but when it was still up at least, you sent it to me. And it really just read like conservative. Even like the whole thing of, oh, bringing common sense back. Like that was in there. That's a direct quote. They're like running on purely Red Scare stuff. But it seems like if you're running on that, nationally at least, which is where most people probably pay the most attention, that's where the conservatives are.
They know what they stand for. They're very proud of it. And so the other big thing they're really fighting on is the drug policies. And right now BC is being racked by drug abuse and drug issues.
Yeah.
And the solution that the NDP has mainly provided is around wraparound support as well as safe injection sites. But the issue with safe injection sites is that it makes a very public space for a lot of people to coalesce,
Yeah.
which makes for really bad optics and visuals. So even if less people are dying or less people are being impacted, because it's all in one place, it's easier for to look bad. And the
Yeah,
BC
for sure.
Conservatives were
It's
the
kind of like
biggest.
homelessness, where homeless can get better, but if there's more visible homelessness, then people will think it's worse. It seems worse when you see tent cities.
No, exactly, exactly. And so that's so these myriad of factors, among others, like housing is just getting worse and worse in BC, right? Like that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And so all of these are other things which are happening that's making homelessness worse, and we're getting to the point where it got so bad that on August 27th, Kevin Falcon, leader of the BC United, went and did an interview with the media and did a profile on him on what he would do as premier of British Columbia. On August 28th, he then at 2:50 p.m., Kevin Falcon then called his entire party. Now, I want to highlight they're the second biggest party in parliament. They have 30 MLAs. This is huge. Kevin Falcon called all of his candidates on a large group call and told them all that he is ending the campaign now, 1 month before the campaign officially starts for election. He's ending the campaign. No one is allowed to run as a BC United member. He's killing it all and turning it all off.
It almost feels
Within
like sabotage.
Well, within seconds, his candidates and some of the sitting MLAs called him to resign. You're like, you can't do this. Leave. If you've given up, that's fine. You can't kill all of us off, though. Some of these people were elected officials for about 16 to 20 years.
Yeah.
These are like people who have deep, deep roots in their neighborhoods, in their cities, in their areas, and they have no say in the fact that he was just going to kill it all.
Hmm.
And so they called him to resign. According to the reports, he said no and shut off his laptop and walked away. And at 3 o'clock p.m., he went on national news and officially endorsed his former underling, John Rustad, and said that we are going to work with John and make sure he's premier to stop the NDP. Thus, redoing the cycle where there is one non-NDP party and one NDP party. And so, one of the most powerful parties in the last 25 years has now been killed. And what's really fun is that the politics and the intrigue hasn't changed since. According to 338 Canada, which is a poll aggregator, the BC Conservatives are now in first place and have taken over the BC NDP.
Yep.
And the former leader of the Green Party, who famously did a coalition with the NDP, Andrew Weaver, has almost endorsed the Conservatives. He said everything except a final endorsement of the Conservatives. It looks like the NDP, which 1 year ago were expected to win around 77 seats, 79 seats, now look like they might lose to a party that hasn't existed since 1928. It's bad. It's messy. And what's really fun, what gets really, really fun is that around 10 of those BCU candidates and MLAs in anger are running with the entire goal to stop the BC Conservatives from winning their seats. Some people who retired are unretiring just to run and spoil the ballot. And to make things even more fun, last weekend, one of the BCU candidates or BCU MLAs, he dropped a 200-page report with every single controversial thing the BC Conservative candidates have ever said in the past.
Yeah, it is. I haven't done a full go through of the report. You know, it's 200 pages. I probably never will get a full read, but there is like just a crazy amount in there. There's a lot of people. It's just like, oh, you used to like the carbon tax and now you don't. But then you also get some real freak shit. So I'm going to dig through it, see how many freaks I can find, and I'll report back.
No, there's some real messy stuff. Like, where is the one where it's like, oh yeah, hair dryers up your nose can cure COVID-19 was a big one. That kept coming up.
I think this is running on the cigarette strategy of if you smoke so many cigarettes, your lungs will be so vile that even COVID won't survive.
There's like a ton of the usual stuff like 5G and COVID relations. There's a lot of stuff about gender identity, the usual climate change. So there's a lot in there. And we probably gotta do a 200-page report. Maybe we'll do like a top hits of the 200 pages.
Yeah, that's my plan. I want to find some of the best freaks, rate them, because you know some of them are mundane, I'll say, but some of it's some real top shit.
What if we should do a tier list of like a top candidates?
I'm in. We'll go through all 200 pages, and we won't even read the whole thing. We'll just rank them.
Yeah. BC United. It'll be the BC election special.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do it that evening.
When is it?
October 19th, if I remember correctly.
Oh, well, we better move fast.
But yeah, it's BC politics. Never ends. Just keeps getting better and better. Mm-hmm. And there's so much more fun stuff that I'm sure is going to come out. Like the fact that the Green Party leaders endorsed the Conservatives, just like another angle I didn't expect to see in this.
Yeah. I mean, Green parties are always like, I'm always a little suspicious of them because sometimes they're like very focused on ecological stuff, but then sometimes they're also just like fully conservative, except we want the environment to be good.
I want to remind this Green Party leader, Andrew Weaver, he was one of the heads of an intergovernmental panel that won a Nobel Prize for their work on the environment. I want to remind you, the reason why John Rustad was kicked out of the Liberals was because he was #celebrating carbon dioxide.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I'm not entirely sure where the Green Party is coming into this, but there you go.
But anyways, this has been our mini catch-up episode. Do you have more that you want to get into?
Well, it's like 2 hours.
Yeah, this is actually almost as long as the original episode, and similar to the original one, we ended up staying super late to record. So, such is life. All right. I got to get to bed now, y'all. Thanks for listening. Bye.